You ever have that feeling when everyone around you thinks you are losing it, like they can't see what you see, and they all laughing while your whole world is quietly falling apart? That was me, standing in my front yard, staring at the wall I built, the one everyone in the neighborhood called a joke, and thinking, yeah, they don't get it. They'll never get it. My name is Jake, and I live in a little suburb outside Houston, quiet streets, perfect lawns, the kind of place where the HOA rules more than the mayor. My wife, Linda, she has been slipping away for a while now, dementia creeping in like fog on a river, and I promised myself, no flood is ever going to scare her like last year did. I spent weeks, my life savings, every spare hour, on a proper flood barrier engineered stone, drainage system that could handle a hurricane, all with permits filed properly, stamped, approved, the whole 9 yards. And then came the community barbecue, where the hoa showed up looking like a parade of peacocks, suits crisp, smirks ready, eyes glinting with that sort of amusement only people with too much power and too little empathy can pull off. Winston, the president, loud, cocky, leaned against my fence, peered at my wall, and laughed. What next, Jake? Sandbags? Oh, please, this peasant stonework is a joke. I could feel my stomach tighten, my hands clench, and yet I had to keep it together for Linda, who was sitting there, trying to smile through the heat, the smell of grill smoke completely oblivious to the storm brewing, both in the sky and in our little suburban war zone. The others joined in, nodding, pointing, chuckling, some with that fake smile that cuts sharper than a knife. Yeah, Jake, maybe you should just tear it down before we foreclose, Winston added, grinning like he'd just delivered the punchline to the world. I wanted to say something, anything, but I knew talking back would just make them enjoy it more. So I nodded, swallowed the words that were burning my throat, and watched them walk away, smug and satisfied. And that's when I felt it. The first real drop of rain, fat and cold on my arm, and the sky opened like it was ready to swallow the entire neighborhood. My heart started to pound, not from fear, not exactly, but from that adrenaline that only comes when you know all those weeks of work, all that money, all those sleepless nights are about to be tested. I glanced at Linda, and she looked at me, confusion in her eyes, wondering why I was suddenly tense, why the laughter from a few minutes ago felt like a distant memory compared to the roar above us. I told her softly, we'll be okay, even though every fiber in me knew this was more than okay. It was survival. It was love. It was everything. And then the rain came harder, sheets of it slamming into the ground, bouncing off the pavement, turning our street into a river. I could see the other houses, their fancy landscaping, the untested sandbags, the cheap little walls they relied on, starting to tremble under the weight of water piling up. I felt a strange calm inside myself, a sense that all this mocking, all this ridicule, it was about to meet its reckoning. I gritted my teeth, adjusted my gloves, and whispered to myself, let us see who is laughing when it's over. The rain kept coming, relentless, drumming against the roof, turning the streets into rushing streams, and suddenly that smug little world the Hoa had built started to crack. I watched from my yard, stone wall standing firm, water pooling around my feet, and there it was, their panic, slow at first, like they didn't believe it could really happen. Winston, the big shot in his pressed suit, ran to his driveway, slipping in the mud, arms flailing like a man realizing for the first time that control was an illusion. I could hear him yelling, what the hell? Move the cars, move them. But the words were swallowed by the roar of the storm. Across the street, Sandra and Pete, those two who'd laughed the hardest, were struggling with a flimsy sandbag set up that barely held an inch of water back. Their faces were pale, mouths open, screaming at each other, pointing at the wall I built, as if it were some kind of sorcery. And for a moment, I just stood there, watching it all, breathing deep, feeling that sweet, strange satisfaction that comes when preparation meets reality while arrogance meets consequences. But then I turned back to Linda, and everything shifted. She was scared, terrified, really gripping my sleeve, trembling. Her eyes were wide, tears mixing with the rain, trying to make sense of a world that had always been safe but was now roaring like a beast at our doorstep. Jake, I am scared, she whispered. And in that moment, all the petty vindication, all the smugness of the Hawa melted away. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about keeping her safe. About doing what love demands when the world goes mad. I pulled her close, huddled under the half-covered porch, and whispered, "I've got you, Linda. I've got you minutes passed like hours, each one stretching, each one testing me, testing everything I'd built, every choice I'd made." And then I heard it, the sound of their panic colliding with nature. Winston shouting, cursing. Why isn't he this working? Move the cars, damn it. While Sandra screamed at Pete, hold the bag, hold it. The water was higher now, reaching their steps, spilling onto porches, crawling into garages. I swear I could hear the disbelief in their voices, like the world had suddenly turned upside down, and they were the punchline to a cosmic joke. And here's the thing about watching people panic, you see them for who they really are. All the posturing, all the power trips gone. Just fear, raw and unpolished. And I felt something I hadn't expected, a flicker of pity, because even though they mocked me, even though they thought they were above it, they were human, just like me, facing a storm they hadn't prepared for. My mind flashed back to the last flood, the one that had terrified Linda, left her crying for days. Lost in that fog of fear and confusion, I could see the same fear in her eyes now, and I thought I will never let her feel that again, no matter what they say, no matter how small I look to them. I grabbed the emergency kits, double-checked the drain valves, listened to the wind whipping around corners, and for a while, it was just the storm and us huddled together, waiting, breathing together, planning every move like soldiers in a trench. Then a neighbor, Mark, someone who had stayed quiet all along, appeared at the end of our driveway, soaked to the bone, waving at me, shouting, "Jake, how did you? How did you know?" I just nodded, trying not to grin too wide, but I couldn't help it, a little pride, a little relief that someone saw what I had done. "Prepared," I said simply, and he nodded, understanding without words. Back across the street, Winston was now trying to haul sandbags with 2 kids in tow, his face red, drenched, utterly frantic. And I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of irony. He had mocked me, belittled me, threatened foreclosure. And here he was, literally knee-deep in water, learning a lesson he wouldn't forget. I thought about the absurdity of it, the way life has a way of humbling those who think they're untouchable. And I almost laughed out loud, but then Linda squeezed my hand, her grip tight, grounding me, reminding me why I was really here. And as the storm peaked, water swirling around, lightning flashing across the sky, I realized something important. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, about being the anchor when everything else is chaos. Minutes later, the water started to recede, leaving debris, mud, a neighborhood humbled, and me standing in my yard, wet, exhausted, but with Linda safe and smiling, faintly tired but alive. Winston looked at me across the street, muttering something under his breath I couldn't quite catch, maybe a curse, maybe an apology I didn't care. The wall held. My preparation held. And the irony, the satisfaction, wasn't in their humiliation. It was in the quiet peace I had given Linda, in the knowledge that I had done what mattered most. And still, as I watched them clean up, scramble, and shout at each other, I couldn't help but wonder how many people out there, smug and certain, are really ready when life throws a storm at them. I sipped the last bit of coffee I had, my jacket sticking to me, and thought, storms come and go, but love, preparation, and a bit of stubbornness, that lasts. And that's when I realized maybe, just maybe, some lessons can only be learned by standing in water and watching the world scramble, and the best part is, you don't have to teach everyone, just those who matter. And Linda, she leaned on me, whispering, "You were right." And for once, words felt unnecessary because the storm had already said it all. The storm finally eased, leaving behind a neighborhood that looked more like a battlefield than the tidy streets they'd bragged about. Mud, debris, broken branches, overturned furniture, chaos everywhere, and yet, in the middle of it all, our little yard was dry, our wall holding firm, and Linda. She was laughing softly, exhausted but safe, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. I watched the HOA folks stumble around, soaked, shivering, frustrated, some arguing, some silent, and I realized I didn't hate them, not really. I understood them, in a way. Fear strips people down, exposes what they're made of, and right now, they were as human as anyone, scrambling to understand how a joke wall could stand where their fancy houses struggled. Winston finally turned to me, water dripping from his hair, suit ruined. Eyes wide like a man seeing lightning strike twice. "Jake, how did you?" he stammered, and I shrugged, trying not to smile too much because I didn't need to say anything. The wall had spoken for me, but it wasn't just about the wall. It was about what it represented: hours of thought, love, desperation, a refusal to watch someone you love be scared again. Linda stepped forward, still holding my hand, and I could see the realization hit Winston, Sandra. Pete, they'd mocked me, humiliated me, and now they'd witnessed something real, something bigger than them, bigger than petty HOA politics. For a moment, the street went quiet except for the dripping water, the occasional crash of a branch falling somewhere else. And in that silence, I felt a strange kind of triumph, not the "ha-ha, I told you so" kind, but the one that comes from knowing you did right by the people who matter. Then came the subtle shift, the murmurs, neighbors whispering to each other, some nodding at me, some glaring, others just shaking their heads. I realized that life in this little suburb would never be the same. Some would resent me, some would admire me, and some would never talk about it again, but everyone had learned something. Linda leaned against me, still wet, still trembling from the adrenaline, and whispered, "You were ready." And that's when I thought about what really matters: the people who need you, the ones who trust you, the moments when your choices actually count. The rest? Noise. Winston tried one last jab, muttering something about permits, regulations, and fines. But I ignored him, sipping the rain-mixed coffee ID salvaged, and just watched him retreat, humbled, maybe embarrassed, definitely soaked. And as I walked back to the house with Linda, I felt the weight of all those weeks lift, the tension in my shoulders ease, and a strange sense of clarity settled in. Storms don't care about HOA rules, or money, or appearances. They only care about preparation, heart, and courage. Later that night, after checking all the drains, making sure nothing would back up overnight, I sat on the porch with Linda, warm blankets around us, and for the first time in months felt a kind of peace that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with love. I thought about the neighbors, about the choices they'd made, and I wondered if they'd ever truly understand what it meant to act out of care, out of necessity, out of love. Maybe not. Maybe never, but I didn't need them to. I had Linda, and that was enough. And yet, as the wine sighed through the trees and the first stars appeared above the soggy streets, a part of me still worried that some would twist the story, that some would claim credit, that some would still argue about right and wrong, fairness and rules. And maybe that is the point: life is messy. Justice is rarely clear, and sometimes the people who think they're untouchable have to learn it the hard way. But for us, for our little family, for the quiet triumph of being ready when it mattered most, it felt like a victory no one could take away. And so I tell this story not to gloat, not to shame, but to ask, what would you do if everyone doubted you, if your joke was really the only thing standing between chaos and the people you love? Would you give up, or would you dig in, stone by stone, breath by breath, heart by heart? Because storms don't care about opinions, and love doesn't wait for permission. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? And if you are watching this, take a moment, think about it, and share your story below. Comment, argue, discuss. I want to hear it all. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just my story, it's a conversation about courage, community, and the crazy, unpredictable ways life tests us. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire someone to build their own wall, or stand up, or act when it matters most.